Shalom, shalom, shalom. Once again, brothers and sisters, we are back with part 3 to When Will the End Be? Nations shall rise against nations and kingdom against kingdoms. Got a very good topic today, short, but very effective, as you know. So without further ado, let's get started so we can get into our commentary here. We got a lot to cover in a short time. Let's go ahead and say our Shema. And the Lord's Prayer, we'll dive right in. Everybody stretch their hands ready to receive the word of Yah. Shema Yasha Allah Ahaya Allah Yah Nawa Ahaya Akah. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Abanawa, Shaba Shemayim, Kodesh Haya Shamka, Ahaya Malakmaka, Taba'a, Ratazanwanka Haya Isha. Ba arataza kawa haya ba shemayim. Latan la nawa lacham ka wayam. Wa salak nawa. Chawath nawa. Ka salak nawa. Cha'awah yana. Wala'a thabaya'a nawa. Ba nes wayam. Abal hawash nawa. Manra kaya lakka. Ha malakwath. Wa hala. Waha ta paraf. Wa alanyam aman. All right. Part 3 to the series, When Will the End Be? And we're going to dive right in today. 4, let's go back to Matthew 24 and let's set the tone and do a recap of the last 2 weeks there. Matthew 24, and let's start with verse 4. We're going to read it. This is where the precept is coming from. The 3 questions that the disciples asked Yahusha on the Mount of Olives. 1 was, tell us when these things will be. 2, and what will be the sign of your second coming? And 3, the end of the age. So we're doing a series on the 13 questions. The 3 questions asked 3 different ways. And then the Most High gave Yahusha this right here, starting with verse 4. And Yahusha answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceive you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled. For all of these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. 3, part 3 is which we are getting into today. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. We'll stop right there. So let's get right into the commentary here. Got some very good stuff for you today. A little bit of an analogy here, a couple parables, something I want to open your mind up to here. So let's share the screen here. Let's get this going here. Part 3, when will the end be? Right? Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, part 3. Things are going on. Things went on back then, and things are going on now. I'm just going to open your eyes up to them and bring them forth so that you can see exactly the Bible prophecy coming to life right before our eyes. If we take the time to just stop and pay attention, you'll be shocked. Bible prophecy is revealing itself, and Christ already told us what was going to happen. So the question, do you believe in the Bible, or do you believe in what man says? I believe in the Bible. And we're going to pull out some of this prophecy today just to go through it. And here we go. Back to the commentary here. All right. When will the end be? Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Part 3. Here we go. First bullet point of the day. Nations will rise against nations. First bullet point. These are the dissensions, insurrections, and mutual slaughter of the Jews and those of other nations who dealt in the same cities together. So now what we're doing is we're taking the before, which is the ancient world, and we're making a parody of what's going on now. So basically, it's nothing new. All of this stuff, it has to happen before, and it's been happening over 2,000 years. Okay, so now let's get back to the commentary, dive right in here, because I got a few videos that I want to share. That's very important. Short Bible study, but very effective. Part 3, when will the end be? Nations shall rise against nations and kingdom against kingdom. First bullet point, let's read it again. Now we're talking about the ancient times, all right, with the first bullet point, and it reads, these are the dissensions, insurrections, and mutual slaughter of the Jews. So we all know what dissensions and insurrections are. You see, dissensions are disagreements. Insurrections are like when you invade something. And those of other nations who dealt in the same cities. All right, I'm going to give you a couple of examples back in the day. Number 1, Caesarea. Well, the Jews and the Syrians contended for the right to the city, which ended there in the total expulsion of the Jews. More than 20,000 were slain there. Now, if you don't know, we are the Jews. 20,000 were slain, nation against nation. Nation shall rise against nation. Yahushua, Christ already told us this. You see, they were rising against each other then. Everybody was against the Jews, the Syrians, which are modern day Palestinians, fighting over the city. Over 20,000 were slain. The whole Jewish nation, frustrated at this, gathered arms and burnt and plundered the neighboring cities and villages of the Syrians, making an immense slaughter of the people. The Syrians, which is modern day Palestinians, in return, destroyed not a less number of the Jews. So we already found out, we know that nations mean people, different types of people. You see, kingdoms are countries, but later in the Bible study, we're going to do another parody of what another kingdom could be. All right, let's move on to the next bullet point here. Number 2, Escalaphus. The Syrians murdered upward of 13,000 Jews. So there again, the Syrians again, this nation warring against the Jews, this other nation, 13,000 lost. Number 3, at Echelon, the Syrians killed 2,500 Jews. Now you can find all of this in scripture. I'm just pulling them out and giving to you a few of those to make a parody of nations will rise against nations and kingdom against kingdoms during the old time. Then we're going to segue into the now. Number 4, Ptolemus. They slew 2,000 Jews and made many prisoners. Number 5, the Tyrians from the city of Tyre. Tyre and Saddam, this was Tyre, also put many Jews to death and imprisoned more. As you can see, what does each one of these have in common? Each one of these have in common the Jews being enslaved, being murdered, being in prison. What other nation has went through what we've been through? We're the original Hebrew Israelites, our ancestors, and so are we. And I think once we understand that, we'll get a better understanding of the history and who we really are. But as you can see, a lot of our ancestors got killed, murdered, enslaved, imprisoned because of, listen, what Christ says. Let's go back to the precept, Matthew 24, and let's read verse 7. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against the kingdom. Already been prophesied. And this was one of the signs, one of the 13 signs that we're going to get into, 12 signs that we're going to get into, that Christ gave the disciples on the Mount of Olives. This was one of his signs to let you know when the end will be. Well, as you can see, We're getting very close. Remember, last week we talked about amplified. And as you can see back then, okay, they had weapons to kill 13,000, 2,500, 20,000. Now, as we talked about last week, wars and rumors of wars, these kingdoms/countries have weapons of mass destruction that can take out way many, quote unquote, if you understand where I'm coming from, the thing that everybody's getting. Yeah, it's tracking down a certain type of person, a certain type of nation. Can't really say what I want to say, but I hope you guys caught that according to your DNA. So the nations are still rising against nations. Kingdoms are still rising against kingdoms. And we are still in the middle. All right, let's get back to the commentary. I hope everybody caught that. Due to the algorithms, I didn't want to use the word. So let's examine nation upon nation even further. All right, let's get into what it means. And then we're going to break down a video or two, okay? Bullet point. These phrases, nations rising against nation and kingdom against kingdom, were a Hebrew idiom, which means an idiom is a group of words established by usage as having a meaning not deducible from those of individual words, such as you may say, it's raining like cats and dogs. Well, you know, it's not raining like cats and dogs, but what that really means is what? It's raining pretty hard outside. All right. First of all, the next sentence, meaning war involving the entire area. So when you say nation upon nation, kingdom upon kingdom, the Hebrew idiom for that, meaning war involving the entire area, everybody around it. And if you think about it, that's what's going on now. Even the war in Ukraine is involving the US, it's involving Canada, it's involving all the European countries that's surrounding that, China, Japan. You see? Let's get into it. Bible study part 3. When will the end be? Nations upon nations, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdoms. All right. So now let's look into this. We're going to pull up a couple precepts that's going to let you know there's nothing new under the sun. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 19 and read verse 1 and 2. The book of Isaiah, chapter 19, and we're going to read verses 1 and 2. One moment. Precept after precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. You can get that in Isaiah 28, 9 and 10. So we're going to break this down a little bit at a time. Nations have been rising against nations and kingdom against kingdoms forever, since the start of time. It's getting closer to the end now. So this is why you start to see more of it. All right, let's go to Isaiah chapter 19 and let's read verses 1 and 2. Here we go. Let's read it here. All right, it says, the burden against Egypt. Behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud and will come into Egypt. The idols of Egypt will totter at his presence, and the heart of Egypt will melt in its midst. Now listen to this, verse 2. I will set Egyptians against Egyptians. Everyone will fight against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. So what does this tell you? Everybody's looking for peace and this and that and the other, but they're not going to find it. You know why? Because this is the Most High's doing. You see, part of the plan is to drive that person, that individual, closer to him. Some getting the message, some are not. You get what I'm saying? Now let's go to another one. We're going to go to we're going to go to a book in the Apocrypha, which is another section of Genesis, the book of Jubilees, chapter 11 and verse 2. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. It's nothing new on the sun, folks. This has been happening. We're just going to pull out a few points, make it, say a prayer, and move on. But I want to bring your attention to some things. Jubilee chapter 11, verse 2. And by the way, this is read out of the Apocrypha, the lost books of the Bible, and Jubilee is one of them. All right, chapter 11, verse 2. Let's start with verse 1 so you can get an understanding where we are. And in the 35th Jubilee, in the third week, in the first year thereof, Reu took to himself a wife. And her name was Orah, the daughter of Ur, and the son of Cheresh. And she bore him a son, and he called his name Serah, in the 7th year of this week in this Jubilee. Verse 2. And the sons of Noah began to war on each other, to take captive and to slay each other, and to shed the blood of men on the earth, and to eat blood, and to build strong cities and walls and towers, and individuals began to exalt themselves above the nation, and to found the beginnings of kingdoms, and to go to war, people against people, and nation against nation, and city against city, and all began to do evil, and to acquire arms, and to teach their sons war. And they began to capture cities, and to sell male and female slaves. So as you can see, nations been rising against nations and kingdoms against kingdom since the time of Noah. You see what I'm saying? Since after the flood. And as you know, that was thousands of years ago. So see, this is why we shouldn't be alarmed and don't fret, because Christ already said that this was going to happen before he returned the second time. So see, all we have to do is pay attention to the signs. And I'm going to bring them forth just a little bit here. Part 3, when will the end be? All right, here we go. Back to the commentary. Another way to view kingdom against kingdom is light and darkness. But before we get into that, let me share a couple of videos with you, modern day, just to show you what Christ was saying. One moment. Let's pull out this video here. When you say nation or rise against nation, we're talking about people here. Ethnic groups, different types of things here. So check out this short little clip here. Rotate.
In widespread unrest, not seen in decades.
Now, mind you, this was George Floyd. Now, they're trying to set a narrative here, you see, to get these nations to war against each other, civil unrest all over again. Check this out.
American cities from Seattle to Washington, D.C. burned as many peaceful protests during the day turned to rioting and destruction by night. Governors in 12 U.S. states have activated National Guard troops to quell the violence and restore order. No peace! It was the latest move in a week of escalating tensions after George Floyd died in police custody. Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis officer who pinned Floyd to the ground using his knee, now faces third-degree murder charges in connection with Floyd's death. But protesters demand more, including charges against other officers involved.
I want to make a change for my people because too long that this has been going on and things need to change around everywhere, because nothing's going to change if we keep talking, obviously, or keep posting something on social media. So
Since Thursday, the Associated Press reports police have arrested about 1,700 people in 22 cities across the country in connection with the violence that has left dozens of businesses burned, officers wounded, and several demonstrators killed. What began in response to Floyd's death in Minneapolis has also reached outside the U.S., drawing hundreds to the streets of London in a sign of solidarity with those seeking racial equality.
Well, we've seen for hundreds of years black people and people of colour be absolutely abused and killed on the streets, and it's just getting worse and worse. We've had enough, and if they're not going to listen, we're going to scream louder and louder, and we're not going to stop until something is done. We've had enough. This is people who have had enough. It's time.
See, what all of these people out there in the streets protesting, what they failing to realize is this is Bible prophecy, and it must happen. Christ said that it was going to happen. Nation, people against people, black against white, mainly. That's exactly what it is. Blacks against Asians, blacks against other ethnic groups against other ethnic groups. This is what it is. So they can march all they want to, but the Bible prophecy isn't going to change. This is a sign that Christ told us to watch out for. That's been happening. That's why I gave you the 5 instances before we even got into the now. Let's carry on.
Time to make some changes.
Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar represents parts of the city of Minneapolis at the epicenter of the demonstrations and says there needs to be nationwide reforms.
What we are seeing, the unrest we are seeing in our nation, isn't just because of the life that was taken. It's also because so many people have experienced this, so many people have experienced injustices within our system.
In prepared remarks after the successful launch of the first U.S. astronauts on a commercial spacecraft, President Donald Trump said while he supports peaceful protests, he won't tolerate lawlessness and destruction.
The memory of George Floyd is being dishonored by rioters, looters, and anarchists. The violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings.
It was a message his national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, defended after another night of unrest.
And the president's outraged by that, and we all are, and that has to stop, and we're calling on the FBI to investigate Antifa and get to the bottom of these violent rioters, and I don't want them confused with peaceful protesters that have every right to go out to the streets. That's what makes America different from many other countries around the world.
With the large crowds that gather to demonstrate comes the risk of further spreading COVID-19. As the unrest in America continues, the number of infections in the U.S. from the coronavirus is also rising, along with the death toll, which now exceeds 100,000. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Chicago, Illinois.
Now, this was a clip from 2020, George Floyd. Now, the powers that be, they are setting the narrative for the next civil war right here on our land, on their land. This is not our land, but their land. They setting the tone. You see, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. They setting the narrative. You know, every time a Hebrew is killed in the street, it's making the people, what? More and more antsy for war. But Christ spoke of this, did he not? Matthew 24, verse 7. Even back then, the Jews were having the same problems, the Hebrews, the Israelites, the same problems as now. Now it's amplified. It's not the same. It's even worse. Check out this next clip here. Let's show you here. One moment. Now that was George Floyd. That was last year, maybe 2020, a couple years ago. No, 2021. It was. So now here's the Ukraine business. All right, let's rotate. One moment here. Let's get to the screen. Now let's move to the now of what's going on now over in Ukraine. All right, watch this one.
Thank you very much for your presence. 1 month ago, the Russian Federation launched a massive invasion of the sovereign territory of Ukraine in violation of the UN Charter. It was done after months of building up a military force of overwhelming proportion along the Ukrainian border. Since then, we have seen appalling human suffering and destruction in cities, towns, and villages. Systematic bombardments that terrorize civilians, the shelling of hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, and shelters. And all of it is intensifying, getting more destructive and more unpredictable by the hour. 10 million Ukrainians have been forced from their homes and are on the move. But the war is going nowhere fast. For more than 2 weeks, Mariupol has been encircled by the Russian army and relentlessly bombed, shelled, and attacked. For what? Even if Mariupol falls, Ukraine cannot be conquered city by city, street by street, house by house. The only outcome to all this is more suffering, more destruction, and more horror as far as the eye can see. The Ukrainian people are enduring a living hell, and the reverberations are being felt worldwide with skyrocketing food, energy, and fertilizer prices threatening to spiral into a global.
Let me share some with you. This is just an excuse. But to get back to what I was saying, nation against nation, these are the same people. Russia and Ukraine. Same thing back in the day, anciently, Noah's sons were warring against each other. Same nation. There's nothing new under the sun. This has been happening, but guess what? Bible prophecy right in front of our face. Check it out.
Hunger crisis. Developing countries were already suffocating under the burden of COVID and the lack of access to adequate financing. Now they are also paying a heavy price as a result of this war. At the same time, we cannot lose hope. From my outreach with various actors, elements of diplomatic progress are coming into view on several key issues. There is enough on the table to cease hostilities now and seriously negotiate now. This war is unwinnable. Sooner or later, it will have to move from the battlefield to the peace table, and that is inevitable. The only question is, how many more lives must be lost? How many more bombs must fall? How many Mariupols must be destroyed? How many more Ukrainians and Russians will be killed before everyone realizes that this war has no winners, only losers? How many more people will have to die in Ukraine? And how many people around the world will have to face hunger for this to stop? Continuing the war in Ukraine is morally unacceptable, politically indefensible, and militarily nonsensical. What I said from this podium almost 1 month ago should be even more evident today. By any measure, by even the shrewdest calculation, it is time to stop the fighting now and give peace a chance. It is time to end this absurd war. Thank you.
As you can see, I gave you an example. The war in Ukraine is the same example that I read out of the book of Jubilees and the sons of Noah. Nations against nations, same color, fighting over land. But what it is, what they're doing, brothers and sisters, setting the narrative for you know what, the one world order. Driving up the gas, driving up the food costs, causing famine and in the land, and pestilence. Christ spoke about all of this. Matter of fact, because of the nations rising against nations, let's go to Matthew 24, and let's start with verse 8. And there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Part 1, we broke off into all of that. You see, it's a domino effect, and they know it. Because of the nation rising against nation and the kingdom against kingdoms, it's going to cause a narrative just the way they want it. But Yahusha, the Messiah, the Savior of the world, already said this would be one of the signs to know my return. Now it's amplified. You see, with the COVID and the wars, whether it be in Africa, South America, whatever, it's claiming more lives now, amplified version, nation against nation, than back then, anciently, with the Syrians and the Jews fighting. You see? Because they only knew that one land. They didn't have the weapons, the information, the technology as each nation have these days. You see? Keep your eyes open, brothers and sisters. I'm telling you, then part 3, when will the end be? Nations will rise against nations and kingdom against kingdoms. As you can see with the George Floyd doing when COVID first started. Look how people hit the street. Exactly what they wanted you to do. And then the war in Ukraine. Nation against nation. These are the same people fighting each other over there. You see? Makes no sense. One more video. Now check this out. I want to share this one with you. One moment. These 2 other countries. This out.
Says it will fight to the very end to prevent Taiwan from being declared independent. Speaking at a security meeting in Singapore, China's defense minister said any foreign interference is doomed to failure. He was referring to the United States.
We notice, separate to the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's remarks on the Indo-Pacific strategy, that the strategy is an attempt to build an exclusive small group in the name of a free and open Indo-Pacific, to hijack countries in our region and to target one specific country. It is a strategy to create confrontation, to contain and encircle others.
Well, let's get more on this and what's being said at the conference. We can go to the BBC's Nick Marsh, who's in Singapore. Nick.
Yeah, yesterday it was the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin laying out America's vision for the Indo-Pacific. Today it was China's turn to respond, and as you just heard there, General Wei Fenghe responded with some force. The general message was for other countries to mind their own business. He said China's development was not a threat to others and that it was neither wise nor possible to try to contain it, and that includes the issue of Taiwan. But look, let's get a bit more detailed analysis on this. I'm pleased to say I am joined here by Maya Nawans. She's a senior fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, specialising in China's military. Taiwan really is the hot button issue here. You get the impression that the stakes are higher than ever after hearing these speeches. Is that the impression you get, or is that just part of the theatre of these kinds of events?
I didn't think it was theatre. I think there was a genuine effort by both Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, but also General Wei Fenghe to restate their formal positions when it comes to Taiwan. For Austin, that was particularly important following Biden's statements in Japan with regards to Taiwan, questions around whether the U.S. was abandoning strategic ambiguity. And for General Wei Fenghe, there's also, of course, a domestic audience at home that needs to hear a certain message. So there definitely was an effort to re-emphasize those traditional lines. That being said, of course, the issue of Ukraine, I think, played very heavily on everybody's minds. And whether or not we can compare the cases of Taiwan and Ukraine is a different discussion, but it definitely brought the relevance to the fore as well.
Yeah, Ukraine definitely dividing these two military superpowers, dividing the world. But we did see on Friday a significant meeting between Lloyd Austin and Wei Fenghe, the first of its kind at this top level since 2019. How significant did you read that? Was there a slight thaw in this very icy relationship?
I think the purpose of that meeting, as has been stated in, I think, the phone calls and the face-to-face meetings that we've seen between the two sides, is to really try and build a floor underneath that relationship bilaterally, to have opportunities to pass messages and red lines. And I think it served that purpose to re-engage again after quite a difficult few years between the two countries.
Yeah, difficult few years indeed, Maya Nouwens. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Senior Fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. So this conference really is wrapping up now. We've heard from the two major military superpowers, still deeply divided on pretty much every issue you can think of. But they did meet and dialogue is happening, something which is ever more crucial given all the issues that this region and the rest of the world is facing at the moment.
All right, Nick, thank you.
Perfect example of kingdom against kingdom. It's only a matter of time, folks, before they collide. You can't talk forever. China, US, China, Russia, US, and its allies, all rising against each other over this one little spot there, Taiwan. Why? It's just an excuse to go to war. You see? So Christ said, let's read it again, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. He already said it. And this was written over 2,500 years ago. And it started back in Genesis. We read a little piece out of the Apocrypha, out of the book of Jubilees, that told you. You got anciently, you had the Syrians warring, the Syrian nation warring against the Hebrew nation. You know, and it's been a lot of nation rise against nation in between then, but I took the ancient, and then merged it with the now, the present, the war in Ukraine. Those two nations are the same, fighting each other. Then you got the kingdoms against kingdom, China against everybody else. But the thing is, what does Germany and all the rest of these people play into it? They're already into it. Because if Russia keeps moving this way, if that kingdom continue to advance this way, then they're going to get the attention of the others over there. You see, basically what I'm trying to tell you is Christ already told you this would be a sign. I just brought a few of it to your attention just to get the light bulb going. With the George Floyd thing, the black against the white. You see, keep them at odds, because that's going to become a civil war if they don't stop jabbing at each other. If China and the US don't stop jabbing at each other, that's going to be a problem. Russia already jabbing against Ukraine. They in the mix together. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. We can even go back to the 60s when we talk about the Ku Klux Klan and how they did the black people then. I had a clip, but I didn't put it in this time. I think we understand what that is. They hate the Jews. Rise against the Jewish nation, the Hebrew nation, and vice versa. You see, the Most High, Yahusha, Christ, already predicted when those disciples asked him on the Mount of Olives, asked him, tell us, when will these things be? You see, they had already started. And then it says, and what will be the sign of your coming? and 3, the end of the age. And he gave us all of these. We breaking each one of them down each week until we get to the end. Today is kingdom against kingdom and nations rise against nations. 3 short clips that I showed you, just to give you an example of what's going on with the nation thing. Here in America, they set the narrative with the George Floyd, the white against the black. You see, and you got all these people in the street protesting, nothing's going to happen because it's written already. It's a sign for Yahushua's second coming. Let's get back to the commentary. And we're going to wrap this up. Short, but very effective today. Just want to give you something to think about here. Back to the commentary. One moment. Here we go. All right, here we go. Now, also when we talk about kingdom against kingdom, we're going to segue into another view of kingdom against kingdom. You see, because there's a kingdom of Yah, and then there's a kingdom of darkness. So we have to ask ourselves, what side individually are we operating on? See, I'm giving you another way to look at kingdom against kingdom. Because Satan and his angels, they're representing the darkness. Yahushua, and his angels are representing the light. Even the disciples, like you and I, that spreading the gospel. So which side of the kingdom are you operating on? Are you operating in the darkness, or are you operating in the light with Christ? Let's get into the bullet point. Short, but very effective. Only a couple of precepts here. Bullet point. This is another view to view kingdom against kingdom, light and darkness. This statement of Yahushua is very plain, but what does it mean? The only enemies Yahushua had were Satan, Satan's children, and Satan's ministers. Yahushua spoke very plainly and empathetically to the unbelieving Jews, the religious leaders of his time. Let's read, let's go to the book of John, and let's take a minute and read this precept here. Chapter 8 and verse 44. Let's see. What does it say? So now, let's read it. Let's read it again. Yahushua spoke very plainly and emphatically to the unbelieving Jews, the religious leaders of his time. Let's read John chapter 8, verse 44. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. You see? Operating on the wrong side of the kingdom. Following the father of lies. You see? And when you start believing them, you practice them. This is why you have to, every day, you have to pray to the Most High for guidance. You see what I mean? Guard your footsteps. Order your footsteps. Fresh anointing for the day, so that you won't believe the lies. You see? So operating on the wrong side of the kingdom of darkness, Yahushua already spoke of this. Once again, Bible prophecy coming to life. Let's move on to the next bullet point, and we're going to wrap this up here. Let's go to Matthew chapter 13, and let's read verses 38 and 39. Tells us where they came from and how they got here. All right? Matthew chapter 13, verses 38 and 39. Here we go. 38. Let's start with verse 36. Then Yahushua sent the multitude away and went into the house. And his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. Verse 37. He answered and said to them, he who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. 38. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tare are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has an ear, let him hear. So as you can see, where they came from their father, the devil. Let's go back to where it says, the field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the son of the wicked one, the sons of the wicked one. You see, the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. So you got to ask yourself this question. So now we know where these liars come from. We know where these people came from that operate on the wrong side of the kingdom. You see, this is another view for kingdom against kingdom. Good, evil, light, darkness. And then the other one, kingdom, countries against countries, warring against one another. This one right here that we're talking about now is very important. So you have to ask yourself, which side of the kingdom am I operating on? See, gifts come without repentance, right? But why are you using them? Are you using them to glorify Yah's kingdom or Satan's kingdom, which is of this world? Wanted to throw that out there. So now let's read verse 40 again. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. So if you operating wickedly on the wrong side of the kingdom, when the reapers come, which are the angels, what are they going to do? The good are going to be harvested. The tares, which are the wicked ones, are going to be harvested and thrown into the furnace of fire, which is the lake of fire, burned with fire and brimstone. You see how important it is? Yahushua came, he explained this to the disciples on the Mount of Olives. But the times he was talking about were now. I'm telling you, folks, this is very serious here. Matthew 24, if you have not read it, I suggest you read the whole thing and then fall to your knees and ask the Most High to give you the understanding. Because the other ones, the famines and the pestilence, oh, they're going to be good. Stay tuned. We got more to come. More good news. Verse 41, the Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire. Ask yourself this question, folks. What side of the kingdom are you operating on? The light or the darkness? Good or evil? Yah's kingdom or Satan's kingdom, which is the world? Back to the commentary. Wanted to put some on your brain today. Part 3. Will the end be? Nations will rise against nations, kingdom against kingdoms. Gave you a couple examples. One, the George Floyd thing, the black and white, how they trying to set the narrative for the Civil War. 2 was what? The China, which is the kingdom. China and, protecting Taiwan. You can't tell me what to do, this, that, and the other. You see? And we also gave you some examples anciently back in the day. How nation against nations, the Jews against the Syrians. You see, it's nothing new under the sun. This has all been going on. Let's move on to the next bullet point. We're going to wrap it up here. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 13 through 15 is a wake-up call. Let's read it. Why is it a wake-up call? 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 13 through 15. Let's read it. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. One moment. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 13 through 15. Here we go. Right here. Verse 13 through 15. And it reads, verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful. Matter of fact, let's go back and let's read. Let's start with verse 12. But what do? I will also continue to do, that I may cut off the opportunity for those who desire an opportunity to be regarded just as we are in the things of which they boast. Verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. Now, see, we talking about the false apostles, the deceitful workers that transform themselves into apostles of light, but they operating on the wrong side of the kingdom. So how do we spot the ones working on the wrong side of the kingdom? The Bible tells us how to spot them, and it's very simple. We're going to break that down. We're going to do a summary, and we're going to get out of here. Let's go to Galatians chapter 1, and let's read verses 6 through 9. How do you spot the ones working on the wrong side of the kingdom? Galatians chapter 1, verse 6 through 9. Let's pull it out. Verse 6. I marvel that you are turning away as soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel, which is not another. But there are some who trouble you and want to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preaches any other gospel to you than what we have received, let him be accursed. So if there's someone out there preaching something different from this than the Bible, don't listen. They operating on the wrong side of the kingdom. As you can see in part 1 of this series, what did we talk about? We talked about the first part. For many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, or in Mark, I am he, and deceive many. You have some people like the Jehovah's Witnesses, they go to church, they're not allowed to read the Bible. Someone reads that to them. So they have to take what that man says into account. We have technology now. We have smartphones. We have Bibles. We have all kinds of stuff. to study and show ourselves approved. It's no excuse. So let's do a recap on today. Nations will rise against nations. And the question, and kingdoms against kingdoms. And the question is, has it been happening anciently? And the now, the present. It's been going on. And Yahushua, HaMashiach, already told you that it was. So they are setting the narrative, folks, right here. And you know how you can get your news before anyone else? Open your Bible. Flip through the word of Yah. That's how you get it. This is right here. Matthew 24 breakdown. Yahushua told us what would be the signs because the disciples asked. And he told them right here. So, part 3 when will the end be? Nations will rise against nations and kingdoms against kingdoms. Is it not happening, folks? Matter of fact, the question is, hasn't it been happening? Even back to Noah's time. And this was after the flood. These signs are being amplified now, right before our eyes. I personally never thought that in our generation, we would see this, but we are. Now we can get on the right side of the kingdom, or we can stick our head in the sand like an ostrich and act like it's not going on. But that's not going to determine whether it's not going to happen or not, because it's going to happen whether your head in the sand or not. So it's best to get out in front of this thing. And the only way you can do that is study your Bible. I'd like to thank everybody, like, share, if you like, and share it, this video, if you like, so it'll get out. Just a few points, short, quick, to the point, to get everybody to understand that Yahushua already made these signs, made these points. I just wanted to point them out to you, what's going on today. Like, share, and subscribe. Tharada for tuning in. Stay tuned for next week. We have, and there will be famines, pestilence, and earthquakes in various places. That's going to be very good. I don't think we have to go far to figure that out. Got some good clips to show you, some good information for next week. So Tharada for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the next broadcast. Y'all bless.